Let's talk about the return of religion. I mean, Brett just brought up that things are starting to become more religious. I remember reading about Dave Rubin. Is he now a Christian, or
I believe so, yeah.
Something like that happened. And I find that interesting because a lot of people ragged on him, saying like all of a sudden this guy who they say drifted to the right is now, all of a sudden he's a conservative Christian or whatever. And the funny thing is, the opposite kind of happens to me, because I've long talked about how I've believed in God since I was 18. Like grew up Catholic, then kind of drifted away, but then I was a teenager, so I had this realization, and now I believe in God, but I don't consider myself religiously theistic or anything like that. I don't follow scripture or anything like that. I just think there's a God. And instead I get conservatives calling me an atheist. Mm-hmm. I'm like, why? What is that all about? I don't know. Weird. But I do think it's interesting. So I just wanted to dig in on why you guys think religion is making a comeback.
Fundamentally, everyone is disoriented or misoriented and is rudderless and unmoored, and we're all feeling it. It's the chaos it's palpable, and we feel it in our own lives every day. And so everyone's looking for a rudder. The rest, we're just adrift in the ocean right now, and we're looking for something to stick in the waves and try to get back to shore. Religion has worked for a long time. Christianity's 2,000 years old. Judaism's 5,000 years old or something. That's pretty firm, solid footing. So I think people are looking that way because it's worked. I mean, look at the Peterson phenomena. Like he would talk. I've heard him.
Peterson?
Yeah, Jordan Peterson. Thank you. I've heard him be jokingly referred to as the guy who speaks to kids who didn't have dads. I mean, maybe there's some truth to that, but I think really he was speaking to a generation that was sort of broken up by new atheism. These younger Christian kids or Jewish kids or whatever that fell in love with Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris and these kind of guys because they were charismatic, and really they're attacking the argument level of a teenager or whatever. But they, if you don't know, if you're not, well steeped or versed in your faith, then it's kind of easy to get, swayed by someone who is as charismatic as Hitchens. So that went on for, a decade or whatever. And then these people that had went through that were looking at the society around them and the chaos and disaster that it had become. And Peterson steps up and in many ways is kind of like the anti-new atheist. He's making similar arguments, but on the opposite end. And then those same kids are I remember Peterson talking about a bunch of atheists showing up at his things and asking him about God. And so I just think that we're looking for, collectively, we're looking for some solid footing, and religion has persisted. So
scientific method kind of turns me off. I know there's real value to the scientific method. It's fantastic for building machines and stuff, but placebo effect is real. No one knows why. They just know it's somewhat effective in studies and trials. That's not, scientific method can't explain it. So that's not a perfect system. And so I look elsewhere. What else is there? Quantum physics is fascinating. Religions are fascinating. God is fascinating. But to jump on one seems like a preemptive mistake. So at least that's where I'm at right now.
I somewhat agree. I do think the scientific method can eventually understand why the placebo effect happens. I think we just haven't yet. Because if you're going to keep doing testing, you figure out what's going on in the brain or in the body. But I somewhat agree, picking one religion. That's why I consider myself non-theistic in a sense. I don't follow any scripture or whatever, but I do believe, God exists. And it's because I've met too many people who are I know for sure, and here's why, let me explain it to you. And I'm like, man, you really are convinced, you know a whole lot. You've asked a lot of deep philosophical questions. And here's another guy who says you're wrong, who's also very learned, so I'm like, I don't know. I think the one thing I can agree on is that there's something bigger and greater than all of us, but I don't know if maybe the reality is everybody's looking through a small lens at the bigger picture at the same thing. And, they're looking through it and they see, imagine there's this big mansion. I always use an example as a ballroom inside with tons of people and they're all dancing. And you look through the keyhole and they're like, what do you see? What's inside? And you're like, there's a big woman with a big dress. Then 10 feet down is a guy looking through the same keyhole, and he sees a guy wearing a tuxedo. No, it's not. It's a guy wearing a tuxedo. And they both started arguing, oh, no, I'm seeing this. He's like, he's crazy. Look. And everyone's like, I can see the lady. He's making it up.
Depending on where you're coming from, you see something different.
But the reality is the bigger picture on the inside is everybody's getting little pieces of it,
You think there's an objective reality?
Yeah, I do.
How would you define it?
Yeah, well, that's,
Okay, Ian.
I mean, seriously though,
I'm
that's
so glad he
that's-
asked you that question and not me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Descartes makes me so angry. Yeah, I mean, I see your point. I think that you have to live in the real world at some point, and for me, it's like that's the table. And let's say I went outside and closed my eyes, and I didn't even know. I had no idea you were there. It was in the dark. Okay, you knew I was there, but I had no idea that you were there. And you threw a snowball and hit me in the side of the face. There is no chance that I could deny the existence of that snowball that I did not know existed before it struck my face. So, like, obviously we react with the material world, and I do think it's provable. It's just that you have to set up such bizarre experiments to get there that you get in circles.
This is why people often argue about what objective and subjective is. And it's like, you've got the brain in the vat thought experiment. Maybe your brain's in a tube and they're poking it with electrodes. Maybe we're all in the matrix. Maybe you at home are the only real person and everyone else is just some kind of video game NPC. Who knows? How do you define objective reality? It's the external things that have a tendency towards being true is the easiest way I can think of it. Like if I throw a rock at a standard house window, the window will break. Or maybe you'll miss, but we can basically predict what's going to happen.
Physics is the most objective reality I can figure at this point.
Sort of. So the challenge is some windows are bulletproof. And so you can be like, I can prove to you objective reality, the window will break, and you throw it and then it bounces off the window and you're like, okay, I was wrong about that. Well, it doesn't disprove objective reality. It just means there's such nuance and subtleties to most things that defining reality and like defining objective reality is difficult because everyone has a subjective perspective. I suppose you just look for the things that everyone agrees upon as being true, which is why we had the argument before about universal objective morality, to which I believe there is one. And it's because when we were talking to Jeremy Boring and Michael Knowles, and they were saying, essentially, what's the point of a planet without humans? It's because we are human. We live within a human experience, and the human experience is our existence. Without humans, there's just, there's life, but it's not perceived the way we perceive it. There's no value to it the way we perceive value. It's literally just a rock and water or something. So from the human experience, I look to what is true in every culture to every person. Stepping on a rock hurts, right? So we can see some things are objective, but it's a gradient. You get to a certain point where you're getting into physics even, and you might say, I believe that there are 13 dimensions. Here's the math to prove it. And someone else is going to be like, you're crazy. There's 14, and here's the math to prove it. And then you're getting into weird and wacky world stuff.
Because they're both right. If there's 14, that means there's also 13. There's also 12.
Well, but you get my point. Like they'll disagree on the math and ultimately the fundamental nature of the universe. So how could it be objective reality if the human experience denies what is true?
I'll tell you objective reality. I got to go to the bathroom. I will see you guys in 2 minutes, and I love
Well,
you.
all right. My point is not that because a bunch of people believe something is true makes it true. It's just that if we can all prove something to a certain degree and then we can replicate it, we've found our objective, reality to a certain degree. It's never completely possible to know everything.
Why is the objective reality discussion so fascinating? Like I'm literally asking, like, why do you think it is that we always come back to that when we have these discussions? Why is it that this focus on like I was talking to someone earlier about we always talk about common sense not being that common anymore. It seems like people are taking this very large scale view when we've got plenty of problems in the very, very real world that we're dealing with now. So we have these discussions, and I always find that it ends up distracting from actually solving. Not to say that's not important or that there's not value in the discussion. There is, but I'm saying that it usually comes up when we're discussing real world issues and these other things. So I'm always fascinated how we go back to these kind of more larger scale discussions rather than staying on the topics we were actually discussing beforehand.
Well, I mean, we're talking about people becoming religious.
And that was it. Okay, so like, so for me, like when I was thinking about religion, like as somebody who's not denominational or anything like that, but I keep coming back to it recently because of an absence of redemption in the world we live in right now. There's absolutely, like, whether we're talking about people who are like strong proponents of cancel culture, or if you want to talk about ideological leftists that are pushing these narratives right now, they don't really have much of a belief in redemption at all. And that's something we went and saw Father Stu, which is like we reviewed it for the channel, and I was like, this might have been like a 6 or 7 maybe, but I gave it like a 9 just because seeing a story that was so heavily focused on the idea of redemption, even if you exclude all of the religious elements, just that type of story is so missing and so lacking in society today, when you're not allowed to redeem yourself. Once you're out, once you're on the outs with the group, you're out forever and you're never allowed back. That's why they say you can never apologize, because if you apologize, you're admitting fault and then you're forever that person. And that sickens me in a lot of ways. I don't like the idea that that what you are at one time is who you are forever, and right. I take issue with that. And religion takes pains to make that a big part of its value system, and that means a lot to me, even if I can't at this time say that I'm denominational.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the communism thing. It's not that they want you out as an outcast or whatever forever. They just want you broken.
Submit to the group.
Yeah, they just want you broken so that they can mold you or use you or throw you away or whatever. And that is, to your point, the redemption arc that religion allows for is powerful and fundamental, and in some ways kind of what separates us from the animal kingdom, that we allow for things like that.
Maybe that's what's driving people back to religion, that they've seen cancel culture, they've seen the woke left, and they've said, I want to be a better person, I want to be redeemed, I don't want to be like that. And so there's a moral structure that says you can be redeemed, you can be forgiven, which is the opposite of the modern wokeness. But let's do this. Let's talk about your book and your story. You want to explain what tell us what your book is and what it's about?
Yeah. When I joined the military, and then I got wounded over in Iraq, and it's in 2006. Got busted up pretty good. Broke my left tibia, my left femur in 3 places, and my left hip in 2 places, and my right hip in 1, and my right femur in 2, and my radius and ulnar in my arm, and my right median nerve got transected here, and anyway, just a host of injuries. My left humerus was broken, all by most all by ball bearings, and I do have a bolt hole down here. But so then I came home, and it just ties into this redemption arc. I came home, and they had me on. Obviously they were having a hard time. They didn't know if I was going to be able to walk again, and so I went through all of that, the physical recovery stuff, and then I got to a civilian doctor, got out of the military hospital to a civilian doctor, and he went through the pain medication that I was on, and he was like, Braxton, I have old women dying of cancer that are on way less than half of the amount of pain medication that you're on. So I was hyper addicted to opioids, didn't know it at the time, but hyper addicted to opioids. He started scaling me back, and then I went through about 2 years of first stage physical therapy, and then I started trying to get off opiates, so I went through struggles with all of that kind of stuff. And so speaking to redemption arc, I lived like a complete dirtbag for a long time. So I'm very pro redemption myself.
I'm also in recovery, so that's a large part of my story as well. Maybe that I didn't even really connect that when I was thinking about it here, but maybe that's why the idea of redemption hits me so hard. But I understand that struggle for sure.
Yeah, man. It's like prodigal sons, right? You went off and lived in the underworld, and now are doing your best to climb your way out, or like as Dostoevsky writes about it, as like the underground. But it's the same. It's the underground man and everything. It's the same like concept.
What's the book called?
The Glass Factory.
So it's about your redemption arc, coming back from addiction and injury?
Honestly, one of my favorite parts about this book has been when I first wrote it, I was looking around, and all the war books that I was seeing were just not reflective of the experience. And it's like, I'm not trying to take a shot at anybody, but they were just not reflective of the experience I was seeing around me. I was seeing my friends, several of them commit suicide, getting divorces, going to jail, losing custody of their kids, having problems. And the 2 choices in literature that they sort of had were either uber hero stories, that are superhero type stories, or this like very whiny, crybaby type thing. And there was no one trying to thread the needle and say, look, a lot of us are screwing up, and you need to quit screwing up, And until you stop screwing up, your life is going to suck, man. Like, you got to get out, and do better. So I tried to kind of thread that needle. And
what was the moment you realized?
Oh man, I don't know. It's funny. I actually wrote about this in the book too. You might like this part of the book you would actually like. I was trying to, you're doing a lot of self-reflection when you're writing something like that, and I was trying to find this moment and pinpoint it when I decided to like be better or whatever. And what I realized is that we all do this when we tell our own stories. Like, we look back in time for this one thing that flipped the switch or whatever, but it's never true. There was always a series of small decisions that led up to or away from making the right one.
What was a couple of the really big decisions you made that led you to the path?
Getting up at 5 a.m. helped for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but just getting myself onto a schedule was a big one. So I couldn't run for 8 years, and then one day I was able to kind of jog a little bit again, and I used to be an athlete, and so I was very excited at the possibility of running again. So I went and ran a mile with my buddy who runs endurance stuff, and then I decided to transfer that into going and hiking the Mauna Kea in Hawaii. And so I had like a goal to train for. And that was enormous for me, to like have something to orient myself at physically, so that I actually had to like take care of my body, And I'd gotten off of the opiates before, but then I was just still living like an idiot and drinking too much. I
want to ask for both of you guys, actually, being in recovery, did religion or God play a role in getting off drugs?
I mean, for me, for sure, it was. I would say. The drug part, well, I was so lost still at the time that I'm not sure how much God really. I mean, so this is where it gets hard. It's like, maybe to my own neurotic, selfish, in my own neurotic and selfish mind, God wasn't playing a role. But I think, looking back, I think for sure God was playing a role. And now it helps a lot.
I didn't have any such. I don't know if I would have been able to process that type of a concept at the time. My brain was in such chaos going through that. But for me, it was, and like I was just discussing with someone about this, how there's no linear, like everyone looks for that moment where they feel like they're getting better, or like this is the big decision. It's in the movies, it's always somebody gets in a car accident and they realize they have to turn their life around. But for most people, it's not something that concrete. You just have to make that decision day by day, and then suddenly you find yourself on a path to do so. And for me, it wasn't religion so much as it was getting finding firm footing on something I wanted to do. It was like skating for me. It was I had been sober for a while, and then my mom passed, and then that wasn't an event that led to it, but it changed things as far as my schedule and my ability to open up my life, because at that time I was taking care of my mom. She was in poor health for many years, so the ability to get back out and just physical activity played a huge role in that. And like you start actively getting active again, you feel better about yourself, and that leads, and it all becomes kind of like a snowball rolling downhill. And it's just it wasn't God for me, but it was more the ability to take your life into your own hands and push forward was very monumental when you've been at the mercy of something for so long. The ability to be in control of yourself again is like I said, I've told that story before. Like when I realized that I could go outside without or like I could get up without being sick, I cried for 20 minutes. And that's because you've now got control of yourself again. You're not beholden to something created by a pharmaceutical company. And that's a revelatory experience that goes far. Like, I mean, maybe that is God speaking in a way, but
yes.
It feels to be akin to that.
I'm thinking about the brain and all the neurons, and if that's connected to the magnetosphere, the extremely low frequency band, and if that's God, and are you part of it? Yeah, that's what I normally think about. Yeah, self-control, I imagine if there is a God, that it's tightly interwoven.
I just wonder, because I hear a lot of stories that, a religious experience or something was like pulling people. I tell this story about this guy I knew who's on drugs, and then he had a profound experience where a voice told him to get his life together, and it made him very religious. I
looked for something like that. Like maybe it's just because like I talk about pop culture all day. I watch movies all day. I'm looking for that movie-like experience that's going to bring me out of the situation I'm in. And then one day you just realize that is not the real, for at least not for everyone, it won't be the real world. It won't be what everybody experiences, and you have to rely on yourself again. And maybe it would have, maybe selfishly, I would have loved to have had that, but I still have such a hard time asking those questions about faith. Like, it's very hard for me to put my faith all in something. So perhaps he had a different belief system that led him more to find something like, to find his answers in that, and I just hadn't, wherever I was on my journey, just wasn't there yet, so I had to find my way a different way. But it's like, that's that movie type way you always imagine somebody pulling you back from the brink, and that wasn't my experience. But I almost would have loved to have had that. It feels like that would have been benefit.
I think at the root of every addict fundamentally is ingratitude for being. It's like just being angry at being. So if you try to cultivate gratitude in your life and take yourself and however you want to think about this bone sack that you occupy, start to take that seriously, then a lot of your other problems will sort themselves out.
I talk about gratitude as a superpower, the ability to show gratitude for, at a certain point, I'm in a very cheap apartment. I'm working. I'm barely making enough money to get by, but I'm skating every day and I'm doing what I love. And if I can go out every day, walk to get around, do what I need to do something that I love while having a job, paying my bills. And if I can be extremely grateful for that, that is something that I feel bad for people that can't find the gratitude. Like I almost feel like they're missing out on the ability to feel that emotion.
What's the best way to find gratitude through pain?
For me, I don't know if I find it through pain. I find it through getting through the pain and finding yourself on the other side of it. And that's the ability to handle it without help. Or like without the ability to find yourself through it and still be okay. Not without help, but like the ability to suffer through it, achieve, get out on the other side and find out that you're still okay and you can still go on. There's gratitude in that for me.
One of the best parts about that is that we all embody that lesson and we don't realize it. Like when you go to the gym and lift weights, you have pain and, it's sort of a suffering experience. And you do that because you know that on the other end, you're going to be a stronger person. And we've known that since we were little. We learn this slowly over time. You're literally embodying that story,
Yeah. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.